Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products.
Recorded May 5th, 2021, 4:03 Mountain Standard Time. Hello, Franklin. How are you doing?
Hello, Brodie. So it looks like you're filling in for Edward this week.
That is correct. Edward needed a break from you. I heard you're a tough co-host.
Well, I have to ask you the most important question I always ask Edward. So what time did you wake up this morning?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I was recently diagnosed as an insomniac, and I have a sleep plan now with the doctor, and I woke up at 7 a.m. and I felt great. It's been a great few days for sleep. How about yourself?
There you go. Yeah. All right, so we actually have a lot to talk about this week. So we're going to introduce our guests that we have, and then go over their recently released Sentinel workbook. So I'll let you introduce them, and then they can introduce themselves, and then we can get into the topic of the show.
Yeah, great. So sorry, are they doing their own introductions?
You can say this is, and then they can give the whole background.
Excellent. Probably going to butcher some names. Here we go. Pressure's on. This is TJ Banasik and Lili
Davoudian.
Davoudian. Thank you very much. Do your own introductions. It's way better that way. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Banasik with the Sovereign Cloud Security Group. Been working in cybersecurity now about 10, 15 years, specializing in security operations and Microsoft, working with platforms like Azure Sentinel, doing a lot of customer outreach and working with different communities to show folks what we're doing with Azure Sentinel and Azure Security Center.
Great.
And my name's Lili Davoudian. I also work on the Sovereign Cloud Security team, been focusing on Security Center for a while now, but most recently also the integration with Sentinel and the Better Together story there. So really excited to talk about that tonight, and can't wait to show the demo and show you guys what's kind of new with our two products.
Great. So if you guys can hear my dog in the background, just let me know, then I'll mute out so you're not distracted there. Well, Lili, of course, when I heard you were coming on, I saw Azure Security Center. So I have to say that they finally came out with the results of the SC900, SC200, SC300, SC400 exams. So I had to go out and see my actual test results because I want to see how well I did in each area. So first of all, congratulations to everyone that passed. People that found it challenging, you can always come out to our Discord channel and we can help you out there. So I went out to my SC200, and you have to understand, I was actually out of it for about a month. I had a family emergency. So basically I left everything for a month and I come back in cold, and I go take the test. And I have to say that my number one place was, of course, Azure Sentinel. Number two was the Microsoft 365 Defender section. And unfortunately, number three was Azure Defender. Tell us, what is the difference between Azure Security Center and Azure Defender?
A very good question, and a very, very common one that we get from a lot of our customers. It's a fairly recent rebrand. It's been about a year, so we're going to change it probably right after I tell you the difference, but that's okay. So as you kind of may know, Security Center serves two functions. We have our kind of proactive security where we monitor your environment for threats. This is our free tier. It's based on Azure policy, and our goal is to take a consistent baseline that we've developed called the Azure Security Benchmark and use it to tell you where you may need to harden your attack surface and address misconfigurations to reduce the likelihood of attack. We have a second pillar called Azure Defender, which is part of Azure Security Center and not different in any way, which is our kind of threat protection platform where we see offerings like Azure Defender for servers or storage, and we cover about 10 resource types. And this is where we provide more of our advanced threat protection features. And we have a really great integration with Sentinel that I'll talk about maybe later.
Okay, great. So we have this cloud security posture management, and then the cloud workload protection side of it, which is Azure Defender. Okay, so TJ, what are we here to talk about today?
Quite a few things, but I'd say we'd start with the Azure Sentinel Zero Trust TIC 3.0 workbook that we released today. Lili and I are big fans of the podcast. We've seen a lot of the work that you guys have done in engaging the community. And after our last effort, I think it was the Sentinel CMMC workbook, we had listened to the podcast and reached out to Edward and said, thanks so much for engaging the community and talking about this. We want to partner more closely with you guys, and when this release is ready, come on and talk about it a little bit more. So I talked with Edward today, and I'm like, hey, it's out there. What do you think? He's like, you guys want to come on tonight? And we're like, yeah, sure, we make it happen. So I'm super happy to be here, and I guess I can talk you guys through what is this Azure Sentinel Zero Trust TIC 3.0 workbook. And I want to leave like a lot of this stuff for the Sentinel Security Center integration to Lili. As a teaser, this is a better together story that we in the product group are telling. So you're like, how does SIM like Azure Sentinel integrate with cloud workload protection platform like Security Center? You're like, those are kind of two different sides of the spectrum. You've got the kind of the GRC type focus and the SecOps focus. When you start to put these two platforms together and you start thinking about how a threat will attack a vulnerable asset, that's immediately going to give you a higher level of severity of interest in what's going on. So one of the many integrations that this workbook will show off, and then I'll, without stealing too much of Lili's thunder, let her talk a little bit more about some of the finer points of that. So the Azure Sentinel Zero Trust workbook is something that we've been ongoing in through the development and preview process for about the last 90 days. Most of it is driven by a community of interest in folks that really want to know more about what is Zero Trust as a general concept, how does Microsoft apply it, what do we do for regulated industries that have different standards like Trusted Internet Connections 3.0. And it isn't that we don't have fantastic guidance at Microsoft about it, it's that there's too much of it. And so when folks are trying to figure out, how do I build a secure cloud? There's 50 or plus Microsoft security offerings that I could use. Like, kind of how and where would I do it? That's what we've really been working with the user community to help them solve. We did a blog series about 2 years ago with Azure Government, and it was a 6-part series on Zero Trust with Microsoft. And folks loved it. The only downside of it was you had to kind of bear with us for, 75 pages of technical blogs. And so people are like, I love it. But in the product group, we'd identified that, like, yeah, that's the first step. We need to do better. We need to make this easier. We need to drive this type of content into our products to help security engineers, architects, governance professionals, regulators, service providers, SecOps analysts, security leadership and executives to all have the ability to understand how to use a platform or an offering like this to make their life easier. So Zero Trust, wide level principles, I think most folks, this is security community, security outreach, like we've heard of Zero Trust. It's around 3 basic principles: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. So at Microsoft, we have a flavor of that, and it's around 6 different pillars. So when I'm building a secure cloud across my Microsoft portfolio, not just Azure, but M365 and Office and Outlook and my entire workload, what am I going to start to align with? Like, how do I define that? How do I protect, my different workloads? And all workloads are different, so you really need a catalog of controls. The pillars that we align with are identities, devices, data, applications, infrastructure, network. We kind of tie it all together with security policy enforcement, with visibility and analytics, automation. So Azure Sentinel, fantastic place to be. I don't know if I want to call it single pane of glass because that's rather cliche, but if you need a starting point to look at it, at least at the telemetry level, and then kind of build out for more depth in our secure portfolio, great tool when you're putting this together. The next thing that we talk about is like, okay, Zero Trust. We're all about it. There's not many security professionals that are going to say, I haven't heard of it, or I don't think this is a good idea.
We lost you. You sound.
Oh, still here?
A little bit
TJ, your mic's just dropping a little bit there, but.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll get a little bit closer.
There you go. Excellent.
Must have been my keyboard. So So back to zero trust, it's something that's been around in the industry since about 2009. In 2014, it gained a lot of traction when Forrester wrote the white paper. John Kinderwach was one of the authors that described why we're doing this over traditional perimeter-based models. He used the M&M metaphor to say, in perimeter-based security, we do everything we can to harden the outer shell, hoping the attackers won't get in and work through the GUI center. So we know in the cloud, like, we move so dynamically and so fast and so quick that different approaches to doing this, especially at a granular technical level. Which tools are we going to use? Like at every security conference you go to, like, the vendors are going to tell you that our tool and our tech is zero trust. And they're absolutely correct. And that's where we're kind of getting challenges. And that's what we're doing with this workbook, is trying to make it easy and show an overlay with our technology. To do it in the government space, we have this workbook that's aligned for zero trust and TIC 3.0, Trusted Internet Connections 3.0. That's a government framework out of CISA. And folks will say, is zero trust the same as TIC? Like, no, absolutely not. They're completely different. Zero trust is a best practice model. TIC is a security initiative. But when we start to overlap the Microsoft principles with this like granular framework and look at the overlaps, like, that's where we really start to get something that's helpful that we can work with in mature models with Azure Sentinel. So there is a bit of a mapping how we do that. I think it's kind of hard to talk it on a podcast. So maybe when I show you guys the demo portion, we can look a little bit more, how do these things map and what do they look like?
So what is a Sentinel workbook in the first place?
Yeah, let's start with that. So Sentinel Workbooks is the visualization capability of Azure Sentinel. So Sentinel is security orchestration, automation response, security information event management. If you've got a lot of logs in the cloud and you want to centralize them for security insights, that's where you would use Azure Sentinel. When you have that logs and telemetry and security insights, if you want to visualize what that looks like instead of raw logging, you would use a workbook to put visualizations, images, graphs, ways to make it a tad bit easier to visualize and make it easy.
So it's a fancy word for dashboard?
It is a fancy word for dashboard. You were if you've worked with other SIMs, the dashboard, I think, is a common term, and I definitely agree with that.
I'm just having fun with the Microsoft terminology, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we make it easier for you. So in Sentinel, you get workbooks. You also get notebooks, too. So yes. What are notebooks? And I think we'll leave that for another conversation. I know a lot of really nice colleagues, Matt and Chris and folks have been on here to talk about that. So I'm like, let's not steal their thunder. You can easily go a whole talking about just about any of these feature blades.
All right, so let's take a look at the workbook.
Yeah, do we want to talk benefits or do we want to just see workbook?
Let's see it first, and then we'll talk benefits.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, team. So when we come here into Azure Sentinel, we'll go ahead and roll down into workbooks. So getting back to what Frank is asking about, workbooks is where we will visualize something in a security information event management platform and look at how we can actually pull out our logs. So what I'm going to do is show you guys how do I deploy the new Azure Sentinel Zero Trust workbook. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to templates. I'm going to click 0. And you'll see the workbook will come up right here. So pretty easy to find in the gallery. We'll get an overview of what is this workbook. So long story short, we're going to put together all of our different Microsoft security tooling into a single place for you to visualize. So you're going to see Azure Security Tools, Azure Security Center, Windows Virtual Desktop, M365 Portfolio in a lot of different places. And what we're trying to do is bring it together and tell the story for you in how does this Microsoft Zero Trust architecture look when you try to bring it together? How can you build a secure cloud? It's going to give you required data types. So the majority of our first party offerings are in there. The question then is, do I have to have all those for it to work? And the answer is no, you don't have to have all of them. Some of them, you're going to be able to get really something from the workbook at that point. So for the first time.
I got a quick question for you. There's custom logs. Tell me about them.
Custom logs, CL. So some of our network sources are within custom logging. So Azure Information Protection AIP will come in there. That's how it's mapped. You can see some Azure Network Analytics. It's just a different way, I think, that a connector is used to bring in some of the data. If you have those tools, that's where they're going to populate. If you don't, you're definitely able to bring in more to it. So this is more of a, I'd say, a recommended baseline when you're getting started and coming in.
You don't have any of the, so yeah, this is all straight Azure logging because I don't see anything specific to Ceph or syslog.
Yep, absolutely. The majority of it is going to use Microsoft first-party native, but a lot of the queries that we use are actually wider than that to where they'll pull in what you have in your Sentinel workspace. So if you have Ceph and syslog and multi-cloud and third-party, you're going to see a lot of that within different places in the workbook, depending on how it comes across.
Okay.
So the next thing we would do, view saved workbook. This is kind of the experience or what you would do when you first come into here, and we get a look at what is this Zero Trust workbook. So you start off with the guide talking about what it is. We talked about Zero Trust. We talked about TIC 3.0. We talked about, are they equivalent? No, it's more of a crosswalk. What we've done is color coded this with different backgrounds. So it is a rather beefy workbook when it's put together. So what we want to do is kind of make it easy on the eyes when you're navigating. So if you see green, that's a definition or a guide. If you see blue, that's a control mapping. If you see red, that's something that we're not going to do in the framework, but we want to call it out to you as like a customer responsibility to say, hey, if we're making a recommendation for this place, here's a control or something that that you should think about. For any log source that we recommend that you use, we're going to give you a little diamond and say, hey, use this. If you see something in here and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't have that. Like, where can I go and find that? You'll see a green star to the product page to learn more about it. So you had some great questions, Frank, about like, hey, what is Azure Defender versus Azure Security Center? Some of the product page blowouts will help out there. This right here, this little blue spinning icon is some great user community feedback. They say, you guys are doing a great job of showing us this architecture, right? But there's 13 different portals for me to go and like look at my Azure security tools and my Microsoft security tools. And so like, how do I get there? So anytime that we recommend a tool, we'll give you a link to jump right over to that feature blade or over to that product portal. So making your life a little bit easier to navigate around. Folks will ask, what type of rights do I need? Security reader is recommended. You want to be able to view the logs to see it. Disclaimer, we can't guarantee or imply compliance. This is just going to be a starting point. Zero Trust technically isn't even auditable, but TIC3.0 is a security initiative, regulated by CISA. They're the authorities there. We are kind of looking at a primarily Microsoft cloud. User experience is going to really differ depending on everybody's workload and how they bring that across. So that is a look at the guide. What we're going to do is abstract that away. What folks in the community will say is like, that is fantastic the first time I come in here to get an idea of what's going on. But once I've seen it, I want to actually get to the core of the workload. So these are the parameter dropdowns. What these are going to give you is the ability to bring in things like Azure Lighthouse and multi-cloud and build like very customer granular reporting. So I can choose which workspaces I want to use, the time range of what I want to see. Then we start getting into the TIC capabilities. So we have 13 or so different families in here. Each one of these will populate a sub workbook. So if you want to look at universal capabilities, files, email, web, networking, so on and so forth, each time you click one of these, it's going to show a sub page with different offerings. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go down into central log management and analysis. And you'll notice when I click that, it actually will go and come down into a sub-page for central log management and analysis. So we talk about what it is. Right here, you're seeing the visualization of the offering. So if I want to come into Azure and do central log management, this is a query that's designed to align to that control. So I can see all of my different log sources within my cloud. And you'll start to see kind of answering your question about like where the connector's at. All of my different Microsoft telemetry is here, but I'm also getting any telemetry that's in my log analytics workspace. So you'll see third party, you'll see multi-cloud, you'll see a lot of different things that are centralized within this workspace. Then we go into what are the Microsoft recommendations around this. So log management is really wide. There's a ton of different things that you could do in there. So we'll talk about what are the required log sources. So many different tools that you can use for centralizing log management and analysis. Azure Security Center is one that'll make recommendations on like where do you turn on your logging and your telemetry. And so anytime that we make a recommendation, we'll also tell you where to navigate. So go to Security Center and check recommendations for logging. Down here is where we actually see that. You can see Azure Security Center. So if you're like, hey, where in the heck would I go for that?
So what is Azure Lighthouse?
So fantastic question. Azure Lighthouse is a solution that we have for multi-cloud based workloads, or really multi-tenant. So if I'm a managed security service provider and I'm doing security monitoring for a large swath of customers, I don't want to have to go into each one of their tenants. That's going to take forever if I'm a large MSSP, or if I'm a super large organization or a medium-sized business and I've got different enclaves or different Sentinel instances. The way that I would bring it all together in a single space is using Azure Lighthouse. So it provides reader rights to go in and see logs in a wide variety of different Sentinel instances, and it allows you to really operate either as a managed service provider or an organization with a central Sentinel tenant.
And what's this Arc thing, Azure Arc?
Azure Arc is what we use for, I would say, hybrid and multi-cloud management. So if I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, I've got Azure and I'm centralized there and I'm happy with that, but I've got on-premise machines, Windows machines, Linux machines, Unix machines. You can use Azure Arc to install our agents, do monitoring, and start to look at like a hybrid or a multi-cloud approach.
Did you like that, Lili?
I thought that was awesome, and I'm just going to go ahead and add that we have an integration with Azure Arc and Security Center, so we would recommend that you spin that up, and we can give you recommendations not only on your Azure resources, but also those in GCP, AWS, or on-prem.
Oh, fantastic. So getting into each one of these, like Azure Security Center, we're recommending that you look at Security Center and do recommendations for logging. So if we go over to here, we can see Security Center, and Lili will talk more about this, but you get a good amount of recommendations. And in here, there's actually a fantastic section talking about auditing and logging. So what we're doing is pulling out the telemetry around that, saying if you're going to do central log management and analysis, you should turn on auditing for SQL servers, ensure you've got diagnostic logging agents, ensure they're healthy, and a lot of other things to think about just within that control itself. So this down here is Microsoft reference. Anytime there's a light bulb, that's where we're providing you a docs reference. The reason that we do that is feedback from the customers. They're like, your docs are great, and I can easily get lost in there because there's so much, and a lot of times I'm looking to do something and I'm not sure if I'm in exactly the right place. And if I click a link, I'm kind of on this choose your own adventure of navigating through. So what we try to do is just put the best documentation there around that specific control to help you save that time to say, if I'm doing this control for log management, I'm going to go here and save the time of looking for it. Trusted internet connections, if you want to learn more about that framework, you can go over to the CISA website to learn about that framework and how it crosswalk into what we're doing here with Zero Trust. And if you happen to not be doing Zero Trust and not be doing TIC, we've got framework mappings a lot of times to NIST and ISO and universal frameworks. So if I'm like, okay, building a secure cloud, in the past, I've been all right for IDAM or PRPT, it can save me some time as a starting block. Some of the other feedback that we had was like, okay, it would be really easy to take one of these, what we call capability cards, and just have like a single visualization for each one of these. And we say, that's not enough. We need to think wide. We need to think universally. We need to try to show the best picture that we can in a single place if I'm trying to plan how to align for just this control as an example. So here we see Azure Security Center recommendations, and the win story here and the success is looking at it over time, right? If I come in here in the beginning of March, I'm like, I don't have a lot of recommendations. I'm in a pretty good place. Low recommendations is saying I'm in a decent state for posture. But if I come over here to April 7th, way different story going on. I've got a ton of recommendations spiking for logging. I've got issues that's telling me I have blind spots. give or take, 130 blind spots on this day. Somebody came in, they used a secure score, they lowered it down, they got back to a posture. But telling that story over time is really the takeaway, the helpful thing that a workbook like this would do is trying to take a deep level of platform telemetry and give you a very wide perspective on that.
Hey, TJ,
All right,
can you jump in for a minute? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Lili. Lili,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, I think this is a good place just to talk about kind of the Sentinel Security Center better together, if you will. So with Security Center, I mentioned that we're continuously monitoring your resources against a baseline. We want the baseline to be consistent so that the number is meaningful over time. But this is a really good way that you can take that secure score and look at it over time and see that visualization and understand where you may need to jump in and remediate and harden your security posture in a way that's a little bit different than how we presented in Security Center. So I just wanted to highlight that, Frank.
So a few things here. So this workbook is more focused on security posture management than actual incidents that have taken place, correct?
Incorrect, but fantastic perspective. So what we're showing you is one of 76 different controls in the framework that's related to log management, but we're going to cover the wide portfolio of that. So if we back out a tad bit.
All right, one second. Go back to where you're at. I have another quick question for you.
Yeah.
I do want to get to incident handling. So I have to say this is a very good looking workbook. And the nice thing is that when you save off for everybody listening, even if you're not going to use this, you should definitely save the workbook and look under the hood to see how all of this is done, because it's a very good looking workbook. And I think there's a lot to learn here about putting together workbooks. You could probably do an entire session just on how to develop a workbook like this. So it looks great.
Yeah, and they're using dark mode, which is the superior mode. So great job.
So I do tell folks when we're talking about this, like when you look at this, there's a lot of different ways to use it. Visually, dark mode makes the colors pop out. It looks rather good. So when you're navigating the workbook, or if you want to put this on Security Operations Center wall, you're able to do that. You can also print the report. So all, none, a custom look at that. You're able to do that up here. So you can say, all right, I want to take my whole framework and I want to print it. I would switch to the light theme. I think it looks better as a printed report there. And I could go and print the content and hand it to my CISO, my regulators, anybody that wants to see posture. It provides the ability to do that. So definitely great call out there. I do want to skip over. Let's get into something like a little bit more related to like security detection and, one of those use cases.
Yeah, I definitely want to see the incident handling one that you're talking about there.
Yeah. So this one we're going to look at, it's a control capability for incident response plan and handling. So it's a different control looking at things a little bit differently. So this is a Sentinel native capability, and you can bring in a lot of different things here. But what this is telling you to do is, if you're going to do incident response, let's aggregate that. So a lot of different recommendations. So detect and report things with Azure Sentinel incidents. You can use notebooks to help you with workflows. You can use playbooks with automation. And what this is going to show you over here is a look at your incidents over time. Now, one of the things I like about this is looking at different correlations. So if I come here to May 1st, I've got a lot of different incidents peaking at the same time. So I'm seeing correlated signals. So in some of these, we'll show you like fusion between 8-10 different Microsoft security tools. So when you're being attacked, you'll see signal and telemetry and tools start to work in unison. So that fusion story, I think, is really hard to show in logging. But when you look at the view over time, you'll start to see those types of stories. So this is more so incidents. So I know Frank and I had talked about, like, let's focus on how to build these things. Like, we can definitely talk about the building blocks. Like, how do you put a workbook together to visualize like this? So for this one, what I'm going to do on any of these panels, the great part about workbooks is, when you deploy a workbook, we'll give you the template and you'll deploy it, but you own the content completely as soon as you deploy it. So you can add, change, modify, tweak, anything that you want to do around that workbook, you're really able to do that. So what I'm going to do here is, let me go ahead and pop into the raw telemetry. So I saw what the incidents are. This is what it looks like when you start to put it down at a query level. So I'm like, here are my security incidents over the last 60 days. You know, I've got a graph. If I want to go in even more than that, I can drop the visualization down. And what I'm going to look at is just a picture of all the different security incidents that I have over time. And this is how we start when we're building these types of workbooks. At a high level, if you're looking for like something like Zero Trust, you want to start with requirements. You want to start up in the governance phase, identify requirements, go into architecture and build. And then you want to go down into looking at telemetry, make your configurations, and once it's there, start to visualize, start to think about how to monitor it. Sentinel is a monitoring tool and aggregation tool, so going to the raw telemetry is where it is. And the win themes for the workbook, I think back to what Brodie was asking about, is we're looking to save you time in doing this. If you were to come in here, there's a few hundred panels that are included in this workbook. So if I'm new to cloud or I have a lot of different tools, a lot of different clouds, it's going to take me a lot of time to find that telemetry. But now it's in a central place. So instead of thinking about where do I find the telemetry, I can jump right into it at any point. If I'm using a different tool for ITSM, I could be using a third-party tool. I could be aggregating with really anything that I want. And once I'm at the telemetry level, I'm able to save that as a panel or adjust it to bring in another solution. And those are really some of the takeaways in the workbook, and a little bit about kind of how we build them and how we put them together.
Really cool stuff.
If you do the SC200 exercises, you'll actually know how to build this. Just to let people know that. I do have one quick question. You know, we do get confused by the, it seems like there's so many places now for secure score and compliance report this. It's almost like getting as confused as the different portals out there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
is there one you know, map of where I should go for this and that, or there's like CMMC over in the compliance center. Now we have it over in Sentinel. I'm really confused. Where do I go?
So I would use it as a toolkit of different things to bring together. So 3 things that are going to be the most helpful when you put it together. Use M365 Security and Compliance Center to look at that M365 story with tooling. Use Azure Security Center to look at your cloud workload posture platform, and then bring in Sentinel to look at it operationally. So between those 3 tools, you're going to start getting a rather solid base and putting this together. And there's a lot of other things that you could bring in, but centralizing it is key and telling that story.
Lili, does Azure Security Center have a secure score or compliance reporting area?
Azure Security Center does have a secure score. The secure score is our single KPI. It's the number that we put together based on the resource health and your subscription across the security baseline that I measured.
Is there any compliance reporting on top of that I can? Compliance reports?
Yeah, like regulatory compliance. Like,
right.
Yeah, so that's a separate feature we call regulatory compliance, where we map regulatory compliance standards like NIST to our Security Center recommendations. And it's kind of a 2-for-1 where you can meet recommendations and harden your security posture while also staying compliant to various regulatory compliance.
So do you not need that anymore with this workbook?
No, you definitely still need it.
Okay.
What's great about both secure score and the regulatory compliance blade is from one pane of glass, we give you both the visibility and the ability to remediate. And we definitely still recommend using it. And then you can take Sentinel as a way to visualize, but action can be taken in Security Center.
But do you need that compliance piece in Azure Security Center for the Sentinel workbook to work? You said there was an add-on on top of the secure score. You have this compliance piece. Do you need that compliance piece in place for the Sentinel workbook to work?
Good question. You don't need it for the Sentinel workbook to work.
Yes. If you do have it, you will see it there. So Azure Security Center Secure Score, you'll see panels in the Sentinel workbook, which will actually show you that over time. So it's really enriching and putting it into a single place to look at it. Anytime that you look at it, like think of it as a starting point, right? So if I'm looking at the Sentinel Zero Trust TIC3.0 workbook and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see a vulnerability or a posture, that's where Lili comes in with the ASC and Sentinel better together other story. So obviously I'm going to have to do something to action it. I could use automations and whatnot, but really the starting point is move into Security Center. Once you see that and make the remediation, that's where you're going to make the action and harden your cloud out. And when you go back to Sentinel in the workbook, you'll see, all right, I remediated my secure score. I had a recommendation. I can start to see my baseline flatten out to where I'd like it to be.
So, Lili, in Azure Security Center, when you have this remediation or these issues, it seems like a lot of times with us in security, we'll just go ahead and make sure nobody can access the machine, whatever, isolate the machine, we're good to go. But it seems like in Azure Security Center, because you have so many pieces working together, if you say, okay, well, I'm just going to now isolate that SQL Server database, that could actually be really a bad thing. So tell me about remediation. How people deal with remediation with inside what they're seeing with inside Azure Security Center.
Yeah, so the most important thing to know is we try and make it as easy as possible through a few different ways. One, we have these awesome quick fix remediations. I'm happy to show it in a second, but where we come in and let you basically remediate in 1 or 2 clicks super fast. But also importantly is we do try and recommend hardening your attack surface in a more proactive way. And you can do that using enforce policies with Azure policy, which is the basis of a lot of our recommendations. So there are things like deny policies or deploy if not exist policies, where you can take our recommendations and really use them as kind of best practices and build them into your pipeline. So your resources are secure by default and you're not always chasing your secure score.
Okay, great. So yeah, that's a very important point. And so anybody that's taking a look at utilizing that with inside Azure, that's definitely a good place to start and make sure it's secure for the team to begin with when they're deploying an environment to begin with. So that's great. All right, what's next, TJ?
Or Lili. Lili has to do her demo.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. Lili's got her demo? Okay.
I believe, yeah.
I can show, let me see.
TJ, you're gonna have to pass control. So you're now the host, TJ. So now you have to pass control to Lili.
You got this, TJ.
You just click on her name and participants, and then you'll say make host. Don't worry, we'll edit this part too.
No, leave it in.
No, we're leaving this one in.
Yeah.
We did
He's a Zoom master now.
Just for Edward, we'll leave it in.
Okay. Let me know. One thing that's great about Zoom, I will say this, is they put a 1 and a 2 on your screen so you can make sure you're definitely sharing the right one. Let me know when you guys can see my screen.
So we're definitely see it. So we're in Security Center right now.
Welcome to Security Center. This is her. The most important thing I'll highlight before I jump into the recommendations is this rather small number. Right here in the middle is your secure score. Again, that's our single KPI. It is a measurement of your security posture relative to the security baseline. We provide the baseline on your behalf. And the reason we do that is we found that a lot of organizations maybe have like on-prem baselines, but as they're moving to the cloud and it's more dynamic, they don't have that policy in place. So we provide it to make it easier, but it is customizable. So if you want to bring your own policies or maybe disable some, you can do it and therefore have the score really reflect what's important to your organization. So that is secure score. And then right over here, you have regulatory compliance, which Frank, you had asked about. And if we were to jump in here, you'll see that we have a bunch of different regulatory compliance standards across NIST, which I think I mentioned, HIPAA. We also have AWS and GCP here. So really trying to bring that kind of end-to-end visibility into your compliance. But what I wanted to show in here was our quick fix recommendation. So if we navigate to the recommendations blade, you'll see these controls. We group all of our assessments by control, and that you really do need to take all of these steps to harden your attack surface. So you'll only see the increase to your score when you've completed all of the recommendations. And that's a super important point. So for some of them, we've also recently changed the UI here. So if you haven't been in the portal for a bit, it looks a little bit different. But for some of these, I'm going to have to scroll to find one. We have quick fixes that are denoted by these lightning bolts. That's new. It used to be a blue tile that says quick fix. But you essentially click on the recommendation. You select all the resources you want to remediate and you hit fix and it's done literally in one step. If you have, trust issues or anything, you can look at the logic and take it and do it yourself as well.
Well, that's just great.
So how is this logged in a way that you could go back to your Azure policy to figure out, is there any, we're doing the quick fix here, but what are we learning to then be able to apply it to our policy?
Very good question. So you can view the policy definition, and if you, by default, all policies are going to be in audit mode, which means that they'll scan your environment and they'll give you your resource health relative to the policies, but they won't do anything on your behalf. If you want, you can go into settings and switch some of the policies to enforce mode, and that's where we will take kind of action. So if it's a deny policy, we will deny the creation of resources that don't meet a certain parameter. If it's a deploy if not exist policy, we'll kind of go in and fix resources that don't meet a parameter. So there are ways that you can kind of alter the policy definition to make it more proactive in case you're deploying new resources.
Okay.
Is there anything else you guys want to see while we're here?
I just wanted to comment. Yeah, I've got a customer right now, and they are looking to leverage Azure Security Center to have that single pane of glass. I know we all love that term for their AWS resources. They've got a whole bunch, and they're really appreciating how Azure Arc can extend to these different public clouds, different hybrid cloud workloads, on-prem. Do our competitors have something like this that I can see into other public clouds? Like does AWS have something comparative?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually think we are the only cloud that offers such an integrated experience across hybrid, on-prem, multi-cloud. I don't know of anything similar, but I think the point of it from our perspective is that we do want to give you visibility into your entire security posture, regardless of whether or not it's on Azure. And I think in the last year or so, we've made really big gains to kind of do that and provide that experience.
I think one of the stories as well is the better together story with Security Center and Sentinel. And I always come back to it as a SecOps professional by trade. If you tell me I'm being attacked, like, yes, that's valuable. I want to respond to that. I need to do something. But if you tell me I have a vulnerable asset being attacked, or a high value or critical infrastructure or something else that is already vulnerable and now being exploited or attacked, that's where you start to get that. And once you know that's ongoing, to be able to pivot into Security Center to remediate it at the same point, or kick off some automation in a playbook to get that for you, that's really how you would cross the divide between security operations professionals and governance professionals and security engineers.
So let me ask you, so when I have resources in Azure, I come out to Azure Security Center and all the stuff is free for me. I can see it right away. I mean, do I pick what resources are going to be coming in here? How do I get my resources to display in here?
So in Security Center, we have two tiers. We have the free tier, and then we have the Azure Defender tier. The free tier includes all of the security recommendations for your Azure resources. So we will provide the secure score, and we will provide all of the kind of continuous assessment that I showed earlier. The paid tier is our kind of advanced threat protection, where you can get the multi-cloud support, where you can get Azure Defender for storage, for servers, and all of that stuff.
So, and there's a trial, I'd imagine, right?
There is a 30-day trial. I think you can see, right down here, we have a 30-day trial. So our kind of go-dos, if you're watching and you don't have Security Center or you're not using it, is one, to enter the portal and see your secure score and maybe address like some of your top few recommendations, but also to try the trial and kind of get familiar with the tool and see if it's something that you would want to turn on.
So one of the things I see here is that we can enable all, or we can enable servers or storage. The question is, can you hand select each one that you want, or is this just going to be when you turn it on, it's for an Azure Defender? Is it for, at that point in time, for all the servers? So if somebody spins something up, boom, you're tagged for $15 for the first month. I mean, how do you granular control about what's going into the Defender plan here?
Generally, we do try and give you a lot of control over Security Center. I mean, you can see that with the recommendations and how we help allow you to add policy or exempt recommendations. Here, we also do try and give you control. So it's done at the subscription level by resource. So you are correct that if you turn on Azure Defender for servers on the subscription, and then you spin up a few new servers, they will have Azure Defender for Servers enabled, but we do think this kind of having it at the subscription level gives you some granularity. For storage, that is one plan where you can actually do it by storage account. You don't have to do it for the whole subscription.
What about resources on other public clouds? Can you separate them? So maybe you just want to monitor your Azure-based resources first and then AWS or GCP later, or is it also an all or nothing setting?
Yeah, you can separate them.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And how would I connect those other clouds?
Yes, so we make it, again, as easy as possible. We have a tab down here called Cloud Connectors. And in a few clicks, if it loads, you'll see here you can connect your AWS or GCP accounts. And then as soon as you do, you'll start seeing recommendations flowing into the portal that you can address.
So when you connect them under inventory.
Great question. You will see them there. Yes.
See the entire thing, or so what is being shown?
Yeah. So when you are in the inventory, the point of this is to give you that bird's eye view, pane of glass, whatever expression you want to choose, into all of your resources across all of your subscriptions and environments.
I feel like this is one of the places where cloud really excels. When you start to get into the hardware, software, asset inventory, in the on-premise security game, it's incredibly difficult. Folks always struggle with this. It's hard to do. Within the cloud, you've got a lot more ability to get that visibility and look at your cloud, your multi-cloud, your hybrid, putting your different agents in. And then if it happens to not be right, or like something's not reporting back, or something's unmonitoring, you get the visibility to know that you have a gap. And I feel like that's something that's super powerful. Like, keep in mind that like Security Center is doing mainly like asset inventory. If you wanted to get down at a deeper level with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, you can start to do the software inventory too. Those are some of the areas where the Azure Sentinel Zero Trust Workbook and our previous CMMC workbook will show you what does that story look like when I'm doing inventory. Like, all right, you'll see this exact inventory will be displayed in the workbook over time by asset. You'll see how does that overlap with software inventories that are coming from Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So just super powerful capability in bringing together those two or three technologies around that control.
Is there any visualization for your network layout here? Is there any visualization of the inventory? Is what I'm saying.
Great question.
Of the inventory, I'm actually not sure. I don't think we have that here. So not for the inventory, no.
We do have network map.
Yeah, we have network map, but that's not the inventory. But
where's the network map?
Yeah, good question. It used to have its own blade, but they've moved it. And let me tell you, that is not a feature I really use, but here it is.
I was wondering where it went.
Yeah, it was. So we used to have all of the kind of like advanced threat protection features associated with Azure Defender for Servers in their own area, and then we've moved them. Actually, let me just kind of show that slower. So Azure Defender is the blade with our kind of advanced threat protection, and then under advanced protection here, you can see all of these like adaptive app control, JIT, and then the network map.
Great. Lili, no dark mode.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's a point of contention with TJ and I quite frequently. So I don't know if we want to put it on this.
So in workflow automation, is that all logic apps, or is that what is
logic apps? And one thing I'm actually, I'll show quickly. So here you can basically super easily create your workflow automation. The main triggers are like change in recommendation health, change in regulatory compliance, Azure Defender alert goes off. You can pick your trigger condition here and then kind of attach the logic app. But I do want to highlight that in our community, if you navigate to our GitHub, we have so many examples of logic apps and kind of workflow automations that we've already created. And so no need for you to do any work. You can jump in here and kind of deploy them automatically. For some of them, we have the option for Gov as well, if anyone listening is working in Azure.
I know, Frank, that's one thing that we talked about, like getting down to the build phase. When you're a user and you're to the point where you're like, do I need to build this from scratch? Like, guarantee we've got a place to help you with it. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, we've got fantastic GitHub repos to help you. A lot of them are just single click deploy into Azure to take that code, take those templates and put it in your workspace, like really build on that whole community of interest type of a thing. And both our products, Security Center and Sentinel, are doing a great job being extensible into there. And we've got some good stuff coming to improve that as well.
All right, Lili, the top 3 things you think people should be doing in Azure Security Center they are not.
Yes. First one is looking at your secure score. It is free. There's no reason not to do it. Second one is remediating quick fix recommendations, normally free and extremely low effort. Third one is enabling Azure Defender, at least the free trial, checking out the alerts and maybe streaming them to Sentinel if you're feeling very adventurous, and seeing the story that we've been talking about throughout the podcast.
All right,
Lili,
TJ.
I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Frank. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask because it may be edited out, but Lili, just for folks out there who maybe don't understand, does Azure Defender leverage Defender for Endpoint for cloud server resources?
Very good question. So if you are using Azure Defender for servers, it includes Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. You get a bit of a 2-for-1 there, and we definitely recommend that you use both of those products together.
Thank you. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just reading some chats here. I'm a little bit late on our chats. TJ, anything specific about learning to build workbooks, or from the usage of the workbook that you have, what would you tell customers?
I would say the takeaways from the workbook benefits, it's time savings. Like, this is designed to make your life easier when you're navigating through the Microsoft Cloud and your extensible platform. It's going to save you time in aggregation and analysis, time in assessing capabilities, looking at gaps and how to fill them with recommendations, navigating around your cloud, especially in telemetry, saving you the time of going to find the docs, mapping compliance for your regulators, or pulling out queries and alerts. And one of the things I tell folks is we did this to really save you the time of having to do this stuff from scratch. So if you're at the point to where you're learning workbooks, go and get our workbook, download it, look at it, click the edit button, look at the code. If there's things you like, change it. Or if you want to create a new workbook, go into our gallery in Sentinel. There's over 100 of them, and say, hey, I really like this. Let me pop into that panel, copy and paste, build my own custom workbook with a lot of different capabilities. So workbooks is just such a powerful platform to allow you to customize things and also save you the time of having to build it from scratch.
All right, let me talk about licensing. No, I'm kidding. No, but actually from a pricing standpoint. So we saw that there was a lot of transactions in there, a lot of data, but you're just reading information that's already there. So in your scenario that you were showing us, how much additional cost is involved for, I know the workbook itself is free, but from data that you might now be ingesting into Sentinel, or is it nothing?
So the workbook will be free. The workbook is reader writes on the logs that you already have. So Sentinel is a SaaS application that sits on top of Log Analytics. Your licensing is by consumption on the security insights that you pull in. Once it's in Sentinel, like you're really just reading the stuff that you've already consumed. So you're not going to bring additional cost for workbooks. You can go into the gallery, you can deploy all 100 plus, you can pull them down from GitHub. It's really just enriching the data that you already have and you've already consumed.
All right, so it's everything that you've already connected through the data connectors. That's what you're utilizing. You're not pulling in and ingesting any more data on top that's there.
So for the most part, yes. Workbooks actually can go further than logging, which is really awesome. And I don't think we got a ton of time to talk about it today, but you can go into like the Azure Resource Graph and pull like deeper levels of telemetry, but you're not ingesting additional things to do that. Most times you're just reading what's there. Workbooks are basically reader writes. It's just looking at a visual picture of what you have in place.
So there's no reason from a cost standpoint for people not to be looking at this.
No, absolutely not. Go for it. Roll it in your workspace, and feel free to let us know. Like, we love to hear from the community. Lili and I, that's what we do in our day-to-day, is engage with our customers to talk about this. So if you have ideas on how to make this better, If you have feedback on what you think or what you want to see next, definitely reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to hear the community feedback. Really, that's why we're here today. Is just working with the community, working with you guys on the great stuff that you're doing here.
Thanks. Well, that's all the questions I had. Anything for you, Brodie?
I just want to ask: is there something that you can share that's that can be shared with the public, an exciting new feature or direction with either of these products that you're looking forward to in the coming year?
I would say the XDR story. That is the path that we're going with security to bring this together in an entire portfolio of the Microsoft suite. So XDR, Extensible Security Defense, plus SIM, Azure Sentinel, you start to tell some of these stories to bring together the power of the entire Microsoft cloud with all of our security offerings into a single consolidated succinct story. That's going to be the theme that we're pushing in the product group, and really looking forward to working with the community on where we go with that and what the future of the cybersecurity industry is.
Lili?
It's hard working with TJ because he has the best answer and he gets to it first.
Lili's the other half of my brain. Yeah.
I think that's an awesome one. The one I will add is that across the products, we're trying to make them more customizable and kind of keeping that holistic, like security posture, baseline, etc., but allowing you to customize it to your organization. And you see that again with resource exemption, with workbooks that you own as soon as you deploy. And I think we're giving you the breadth across cloud, across subscriptions, across tenants, but allowing you a little bit of customization to really make it meaningful.
Excellent. And the final question is, are you willing to come back, or was Brodie too mean to you?
We would love to come back.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, thanks a lot. And I
Thank
believe
you.
that Edward will be back next week. Until then, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, team.